This is the Fly Culture Podcast with me, your host, Pete Tigers. Paul Procter is one of the most recognisable names in fly fishing in the UK. At home on the streams of the north of England, he's also travelled the world in search of rising trout. I sit down with him and talk trout, fly patterns, destination fishing, fly rod design, and along with some fishing tips, and discuss his life in fly fishing so far. Welcome everyone to the very latest Fly Culture podcast. It's early September's. The river is still really low. I desperately would love some rain right now. It feels to me like autumn has charged in rather than gently crept in. The hatches are now starting to be a little earlier now. I was doing some spey casting tuition with a lovely lady called Lucy yesterday, and we were watching the caddis really get going around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I think that's really what we're starting to see now for this time of year. I plan to try and get as much out of the season before it closes now. It really does feel like the clock is ticking at the moment. But in the meantime, I'm really pleased to be sitting down with my good friend Paul Procter, and we're going to talk a lot about fishing, about techniques, about his life in fishing, and pick his brains a little bit. So I'm really excited about this one. Paul, it's great to have you down here in Devon.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. I know on your last podcast, or one of the previous ones, you said, I'm very fortunate to have people travel to me. I think you ought to come to bloody Cumbria.
Yeah. I plan to try and travel a little bit further north as we go on, and when the season shuts. I'm running out of time, man. I want to fish the tour as much as I possibly can, and it's quite an achievement to get you down to this neck of the woods. But you're in good shape.
I'm very good, thanks, Pete. At the moment, very good. Feeling good in myself. Reasonably fit, and that's how I like to keep myself. So. Yeah, fishing's good. It's been a great season for me.
Good, fantastic. And I know, like myself, everyone's been enjoying those great pictures, those phenomenal fish you're putting up as well. You are in a rich vein of form, aren't you?
Very much. There are days, you know yourself with fishing. I've just seemed to have had a season where I can't put a foot wrong for whatever reason, you know. I'm just very fortunate, very fortunate.
And we hope to get you down on the tour after this as well. And I saw a nice one I've got marked for you a little bit later as well. So,
Pete, don't tell people that. They'll think I've got scouts going around marking big trout for me in various places.
And we were talking in the bar. We had a coffee and a sit down beforehand. But it seems as though 15 years ago we first met.
I think it was. I can remember that night extremely well. It's pretty much etched in my memory with both our good friends, Brett O'Connor, the Brash Brummie, and Jim Fern as well. I just have fond memories of that evening. We had such a laugh. It
was fantastic.
Drank a lot of beer and we just all gelled, and the crack was really good.
It was. That felt to me, and you mentioned those guys as well, and I kind of remember, there was Tim Smith there, there was Simon Kidd was there, Lee Cummings, Mark Bailey, and it really felt to me at that moment in time, and I'm sure people a little bit younger than us are now are saying exactly the same thing, but that moment to me felt a really great time in fly fishing.
It was like for me, and where we were all striving for our qualification. It was like the golden years, if you like, a period where we just all gelled. Everybody, you mentioned Lee, of course, Lee Cummings, and look where Lee's at now with casting. He's at the forefront of it.
And it's wonderful. I was talking to him actually the other day, and how he's got his wife Angela into it, and she casting salmon fishing.
Yeah, she's pretty tidy.
Yeah,
with that
I saw her on the salmon river the other day, and that was pretty sweet as well. So it's wonderful to see how everyone's career, and I suppose we see, we bump into each other all on the circuit and stuff, and I suppose that was the days before it was harder to get in touch with everyone, so you saw people at these events and spent a lot of time together.
It was, wasn't it? It's a big deal. I mean, going back, we go back to when we were relatively the same age, and
I'm slightly younger.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks. Well, I've got a mental age that's younger than yours. You know, you go back that many years, you're absolutely right. You went to these events, and part of it, you went to look for what wasn't accessible then on the interblobby, if you like. Capes or fly time materials or certain rods to try out, but also it was social to meet up with friends, and it was quite a big deal for all of us. I know when you see each other, you know, your eyes light up, and how are you doing, and you know, a long time to chat and everything like that.
Yeah, proper brotherhood, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I think the best place to start is the very beginning. Where are you from?
I'm from the deep south. The accent gives it, yeah. Cumbrian born and bred.
Yeah.
Lived there all my life. Kind of toyed with the idea of moving in recent years. Don't know if I will, Pete, because I'm fortunate, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a wee while, the rivers I have on my doorstep and what they're capable of yielding and producing is phenomenal, really. But yeah, I lived in Cumbria all my life. And pretty much, if in terms of fishing, well, I'm from farming stock, really. My grandfather, my grandparents were farmers. My father went into farming, and due to illnesses in the family, my great uncle as well, they had to sell the farm up. So, in some respects, I think I had a lucky escape. I think I'm far too tidy and bloody OCD to be a farmer, you know.
Yeah.
That's not disrespect to farming community either. You know, I grew up with them because from there, had a lot of contacts. Early days for me, my father shot, my grandfather shot, ferreted. So it was all about country pursuits, if you like, shooting, ferreting, all that kind of thing. I mean, a friend and I were absolutely crazy on it. You know, every night we were up the fields, bloody snares, catapults, you name any device, contraption possible to terrorise wildlife. You know, it was that was pretty much it. Traditionally, no fishing influence in my family whatsoever, but always intrigued. It was part of nature, you know, the whole concept, the birds, the animals, and the streams and the fish. And cut my teeth, as probably most anglers do where there's no influence, with coarse fishing. Initially catching perch, roach, rudd, wee skimmer bream and things like that. And then basically what happened, one Sunday, it was absolutely pouring down. So stuck indoors, grumpy for that then wee age, and my dad watched all the, you know, farming programme, which then evolved into Countryfile. And you might remember these, Pete, Out of Town with Jack Hargreaves.
I do, in fishing,
well,
absolutely.
Get this, that Sunday they had fly fishing on, and it was with Barry Wellham.
Oh, yes.
Bless him.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I was mesmerised. I thought, I was captivated. I just thought, I so want to do that. So I pestered my parents, who in my early teens presented me with a fly rod, fly reel and fly line for my birthday, and that's when the love affair began, really.
And was that rivers immediately for you where you were based?
I cut my teeth on rivers, and nice. I think that was convenience, because a mile, actually a little bit further, perhaps 2 miles from where I lived, then with my parents, there was it was called Newland Beck. A wee stream, you know, and it had a nice thriving population of wild brown trout. Used to get sea trout up it as well, and the occasional salmon. I will explain.
They got in the way for you a little bit, those, I guess.
I'll explain why I call them salmon in a wee while, but I don't want you to correct me on how I pronounce that, Pete. How I got to know about that stream, we were ferreting for the farmer on that land, and would often see trout in the stream. And that's where I began my fly fishing career on that stream. As daft as out, just because I'd seen on the Out of Town programme with dry fly, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
And I'd gone into the local tackle shop, Parker's in Ulverston, bought a range of flies, because I didn't know what I'm looking at. I bought flies that I could recognise, like white moths and daddy longlegs, you know. And I put a white moth on in the middle of the day, and up come these wee 8-inch trout and eat it, you know. And that was it. That was it. Away we went.
So is it fair to... Because I assumed you'd be sitting there saying, well, I've swung some spiders and bits and pieces like that. So it's always been there then, hasn't it, this dry fly thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not me saying dry flies the hardest. I don't want people to think I've got my head up my backside, because I know what you'd like to talk about is dry fly fishing in a wee while. I mean, you could argue that nymphing or subsurface is three-dimensional to what dry fly fishing is two-dimensional.
And you're not seeing the fish, are you?
No, absolutely. So
yeah.
there's a lot more going on when you're nymphing. I think it's a lot more challenging discipline than dry fly fishing, you know.
So was it the case that school got in the way of your country pursuits and stuff like that, or was there a path that you were looking to...
I don't know if you've been talking to, if you've got inside info, it's very much the opposite.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Right, yep.
God, man. School and I weren't the best of friends, is perhaps the best way to put it. I could argue in hindsight, squandered my education, but I just had this love and hankering to be outdoors. You know, I can remember being in class and you're looking out, you're waiting for that school bell to go at 3:30, dash home, forget the homework, just dump that crap in the corner, on with your whatever, your outdoorsy kit, your shorts in them days, and up the fields with your mates, you know, bloody... lurchers and anything, and you came back home when it was dark, and that was it. And then suffered the consequences the next day when your homework wasn't.
Yeah, you did it on the bus. Or
just took the bullet for it. You know?
I remember one of our school reports came home, and I actually ripped the pages out, the ones that weren't very good, which meant that basically I gave my parents a cover. And that was it, because I'm the same.
You're worse than me.
Yeah,
I didn't realise you were like that.
No, I hated school. I really hated every second of it.
Yeah, it's different for kids these days. I've got children myself, and, you know, very, very different environment. You know, I wish I could grow up as it is now. You're nurtured into it. Back then, if you were a bad boy, you got penalised for it. In some respects, I get that as well, you know. But yeah, I forgot what I was going to say then. Oh yeah, school reports, man. There was always a sentence in mine that read, "Paul is a pleasant boy, but somewhat easily led."
Looks like you got one of my pages. Yes, it was an interesting time from that point of view. And like you say, it's a lot different these days. And I know, you know, I saw the pictures of proud dad and son at university, and I was the same. Yeah. My daughter was the first in our family to go to university and stuff, which is really, really cool. So with school not affecting you that, did you have a plan of what you were going to do, obviously with the farming, or was fishing starting to emerge?
Okay, well, God, I had this, like I say, it was just this, I consumed with the countryside, you know. It's more than just fishing for me. I love wildlife, you know, in all its forms. And when I'm out fishing, as Howard Croston, a very good friend of mine, you know Howard, always said, it's like bloody fishing with Bill Oddie, you know. Oh, there's a so-and-so, oh, listen, blah, blah, you know. God, look at that, you know. I just love it. I love the outdoors. I nearly went into gamekeeping. I went on a placement, and again, this isn't a reflection on gamekeepers. I know there's good and bad in every walk of life. I went to meet the gamekeeper, and there he was coming back from his morning patrol, shotgun under the arm, carrying a Tony Owlid shot. So, and I love raptors, I really do. And that was it for me. I thought, this isn't for me, if I can be that candid about it. You know. So then, obviously, with limited qualifications, if you like, got farmed out to the shipyard in our neck of the woods, and sort of forged a career there in working on submarines, or black pigs as we used to call them. Dark days, but I wouldn't change it. It was it forged part of what I am. You know, that kind of humour and hardship in the shipyard sort of sets you up really well. Did 10 years there, and I kind of figured then I could earn good money. It paid well, because it was state of the art. We were welding and fitting. We fitted the nuclear coolant system. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say this with the official secrets. No one's listening. To sign that. Yeah. Yeah, we were fitting the see, it's on the brain, isn't it?
Yeah.
The nuclear coolant system into subs for the reactor, and it was all fancy and exotic materials like Monel and various grades of stainless steel. So it was high spec, high tech, and sort of the elite of the elite in terms of welding. And again, I could have applied myself a wee bit more, and world would have been my oyster. I could have travelled all over the damn world. I got opportunities, but no, little old Paul in his stubborn ways of God, where can I fish here, there and everywhere? And this is long before what the information we have at our fingertips now, So I'd resign myself at that stage to thinking I'll just earn good money and basically go out to work to fish.
And at this stage, did you have a mentor? You say the outdoors was really, really important to you, but did you notice the fishing, was there a mentor that took you in the direction that fishing was becoming a larger part of that at that stage?
I didn't really have any mentor as such in terms of what you mentioned there. Obviously, there's been influences and things like that, which again, I'm sure we'll touch on.
Oh, who would they be? Yeah, I'd be fascinated too.
Yeah, and back then, I just hankered to be outdoors, and the opportunity, I suppose, came when I was made redundant in the shipyard. There'd been a change in the government, and consequently no orders for X amount of submarines, so the workforce had to shrink. I think at its height when I was there was 14,500 working in the shipyard, and God knows what it is now. We're talking a few thousand, I believe.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So it shrank and shrank and shrank. So consequently there was redundancies, and I can remember in our squad there were 7 of us being proud about it, if you like, and 2 of us had to go. I remember the other guy, he was a shop steward, obviously outspoken and a thorn in the side of the management, so he'd be a contender. And me, and it bugged me for a while, Pete, because I thought, God, I was a good welder, I was a neat welder, well hand-eye coordinated, a left-hander as well, so if you had a pipe against a bulkhead, the right-hander would come that way and you'd get a lefty to come that way.
Yeah.
So I want you to remember, Pete, 1 left-hander's worth 2 right-handers, okay?
Your words, not mine. Yeah.
So I was of value, but the thing was I never worked weekends or did dinner hours. Sometimes there'd be a rush job, Procter, can you work the dinner hour? Oh, bugger that. No, I used to go
Fishing.
shoot off over on the estuary and things like that, scoping out bass and bloody mullet and all kinds of things, So yeah, I went, and then that was quite a defining moment. And I wouldn't say I chose fishing as a career, and I don't look at it as a career, Pete. It's more, for me, a lifestyle or vocation, and it kind of morphed into it,
So how did that happen? What were the next steps?
Right,
so
okay.
You lost your job.
Yeah,
and then...
so I thought, bugger it, I can't remember how old I was, 26. I'll take a gap year. You're supposed to do that at 18, aren't you, something. I need some, I'd done 10 years in the shipyard. I thought, bugger this lot. Really heavily into my fishing. I'd stopped shooting a long time ago. Reason I did that is because, comes a point when you think I've killed enough animals, I remember shooting a pink-footed goose, and they're a gorgeous bird. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Got a lovely sort of chocolate-coloured mane. And it was one of them you'd shot, and there wasn't a feather out of place or a speck of blood on it or anything. And I got it back to the hide, and it sounds whimsical. I just sort of waiting for more geese to come in. I could hear them a long way off. It was just coming light, sort of just stroking its mane. And then I start thinking, this has travelled thousands of miles, and I've just killed it, And that was it. I brought my gun, went home, sold all my guns and everything. And I was fishing at the time. It used to be in them days. I'd shoot through the winter and fish through the summer, and then that fishing just took over.
And did you feel the same about the fishing? Did you go to catch and release as a result
I
of
went
that?
pretty early. Going back, them early days, I can remember first 8, I was catching 4, 6, 7, 8-inch trout. First 12-inch trout are nobbled, like it got bashed on the head and taken home and paraded round to all and sundry, the big white hunter bit. And a bit of that went on, and strangely enough, I was thinking about this the other day, Pete. Very quickly, because I grew up as you did in a generation or era when it was very much catch and kill. I, very early on in my sort of fishing days, adopted this, why am I killing them? You know, I don't mind taking a trout to eat, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. That is important.
It is, and being brutal about it. It's a blood sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you know, we are doing what we're doing.
I prefer the term field sport.
Field sport, I think. Yeah, I think you're right. You know, and if it's in the rules and you're allowed to do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing is that fewer and fewer people are doing that now, aren't they? And the people younger than us wouldn't even consider it.
I mean, I think if you go back, things are very different now. The environment's challenged and compromised in many ways, shapes and form. But way back then, you know, you could argue the advent of the deep freeze killed a lot of fish because you didn't have to eat it fresh. You could take it home, bang it in the freezer. And if I feel like a trout, and I don't kill the big ones for obvious reasons because they've potentially got the genes to produce the next generation. But a nice fit 3/4 pound wild fish to eat is delicious. And I'll think if I'm out, I'll perhaps take one and have it for breakfast the next morning or something like that. And you know that's important. I do believe that's important.
And I think you're exactly right. And I think one of the interesting things I was just thinking about when you said that was the real our thing was the boom in the small still waters. The put and take fisheries were really at the peak of their powers, really, weren't they? Coming into those, and a lot of these fisheries were coming in, so it was normal to whack them then, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Well, here's a strange thing, because most guys, and I get it, and I'll never speak out against still waters because they're important. There's a few things they bring people into the sport, especially near cities and things like that. And plus, if we didn't have them, every bugger would be pacing up and down my rivers and things like that. You know? But the important thing, I got sort of seduced by, I was catching in my streams trout like this, and I used to visit a little tarn. It was called Rosside Tarn, and that was a day adventure. That was like 4 or 5 miles away from home. Pedal bike, sandwiches packed. You know, it was a full on day assault kind of thing, and we used to go there and catch trout like this. And I was coming away from there and bumped into this bloke, and he fished on the tarn above us, which was private, called Notolla, and they used to stock that, and stories of bloody great big trout. Well, that, you know, as a teenager, you're catching 8 inches, and then you see the heady heights of like £2, £3. I want it, and I'd consequently joined that club and future clubs, and spent a lot of time fishing still waters, you know. And then I think it was just my late teens I spent pretty much on still waters and lakes. I used to fish Lake Windermere, Ullswater. Used to fish, here's a nice story for you, with a very good friend of mine, Dave Nixon, who we christened Knocker Nixon, because at that time, everything, going back to Casey Point, everything that came in, he batted on the head. In fact, I used to have the guys at the fly dressers in stitches say, when Dave catches a fish, it doesn't fight because it comes in with its pectoral fins like that over its head. But Knocker, bless him, he was really into wild fish, just as I am, and he had a boat, and we used to go on Lake Windermere, Ullswater, and all over the damn place pursuing wild trout then. But then gradually, and he was quite, he was a bit of a catalyst as well, because then we started fishing for grayling heavily in the winter and spent several seasons travelling together to fish for grayling, you know. So I'd lost our train of thought there, Pete, what we were talking about.
I think we're just going with the flow.
Right, that's
take
good
this.
for me.
The nice thing about these podcasts is that we go with the flow. So wherever it takes us, and we leave it, as I said to you, we don't edit it, we don't cut it, splice it, it just goes exactly where it goes. But so we were on the cusp of, it sounds like you coming into fishing as a lifestyle job.
I'd taken this gap year, I was doing some work, some groundwork for my father. He used to own some heavy plant gear with JCB diggers and things like that, so I'd often help him out on jobs. But I started I was time flies then. I got into fly time very early, and I was time flies for customers and things like that, and doing a little bit of guiding and tuition, and this is way before, app guy and things like that. But people ask for it, will you show me this, will you do that? So that was providing a little bit of pocket money. And then one day I get this phone call from a local fishery. We've got, I think it was trout and salmon coming along, and can't remember who it was. I remember the photographer though. It was Rod Calbray.
Oh yes, were you good friends?
Rod and I are very good friends, and we still work together. And the guy at the fishery said, Paul, the fishery manager, said, look, I've got trout and salmon coming. You clearly know what you're doing with the flies. You fish on our water. Can you give me a selection of flies, and you'll get a good plug in the article. So, I thought, blinking heck, this is fantastic. So Julie delivered the flies. Unfortunately, on the day they came, I didn't know this, or when it was. Apparently the weather was goddamn awful, what typical Lake District weather, howling gale, peeing down all day. Consequently, they didn't get what they needed. I think they caught fish, but cameras and horrible weather really don't go hand in glove, do they?
No.
And so they obviously took the photos back and thought, well, we can't make a feature out of this. So next minute I get a phone call from I think it was Sandy Leverton.
Yep.
What a great guy he is. God, man. Anyway, Sandy, Paul, you clearly know what you're doing with the flies, and would you go meet the photographer and go along? And it was one of them days the fishing gods sort of smiled on us, Pete. The weather was perfect in terms of light for photography, and there was a good hatch, and we caught a stack of fish. And this went back to the magazine, the photos. Sandy's back on the blower. Blinking heck, these are fantastic, big fish, blah, 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 do you want to write it? At which point I recoiled, thinking, crap, I'm not capable of this. Anyway, I had to go, and and John Wilshaw was sub-editor. John and Sandy were very influential because they gave me quite a lot of belief, and they were truthful. Yeah, it's raw, Paul, but you clearly know your subject, and it was tidied up, obviously, and then some time went by, and then some clubbers called us. They want a river, their section of river. Would you meet Rod and go along? And it just sort of grew from that. It was not intentional, Pete. It just sort of grew, and obviously, you see your name in lights. It's a proud moment, but equally more people see that and
feeds itself.
Absolutely. So
it's interesting what you say about the fishing gods, and I think you're doing yourself a disservice, obviously, that it is an incredibly hard industry to make work as a living, yet, you say the fishing gods, but people sometimes get those chances and they take them and make them work, which is really cool to hear.
You're right. I've got a very good friend who I really need to mention, Brian Pickthall. Again, he was a massive influence. In the early days, he gave me belief. And we fished together. He was another good friend with Knocker. The three of us would bugger off Kelly Kettle, for weekends here, there, fishing down in Wales. Some adventures we got up to. It was, that's a podcast in itself. Absolutely crazy things. All kinds of weird and wonderful things happening. Just blokey things and lads and fishing fun. And things going wrong, all kinds of stuff. But Brian is, and he still is, we're very good friends. In fact, I was just with him before I came down here. We met up for a few beers and a crack. And he's been massive in terms of helping me.
So your momentum's starting to build, and it just keeps rolling. I guess the magazine articles help, and your obvious skill as a fly tyer, fisherman, everything's starting to get going.
Yeah. Again, I don't have a game plan, Pete. I'm just sort of bimbling about. I know people don't believe that, but those guys who are close to me and friends kind of see that, and I can see frustration in them, saying, "For Christ's sake, Paul, you're wasting this talent, that, or whatever." I'm happiest with being down by river with a fly rod in my hand and mooching about. And what price can you put on that? And equally, by the same token, that comes at a price. It comes at a cost. financial and personal as well. But I've wrestled with it for a lot of years, Pete, but it is what I am at the end of the day. There's no point, you know.
And being at the top of the game takes dedication, it takes sacrifice, it takes a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I don't view myself at the top of the game. There's a lot of peers or contemporaries. Again, Howard Croston, he's been a big influence. Yeah. Howard and I've done lots of trips fishing chalk streams. We just hit it off like you wouldn't believe. That silly schoolboy sense of humour. Howard's made a great career for himself in fly fishing, as you know, and we can not speak for 6 months. Pick the phone up and it's like we just spoke yesterday. You know, how's it going? Blah blah blah. This that, and then we're into the little sort of schoolboy digs and one-upmanship on taking the mick out of each other and things like that.
And that's the fun about it, isn't it? That it's not just the fishing, it's everything that goes with it, to a breakfast that you have with a friend before you go fishing, to, like you say, the phone calls. There is a lot more to it, isn't there? It's not just...
it is, and it's early season. I always laugh now with mobile phones. We all say, I mean, we're lost without them. I'm a hypocrite because for so long I shunned all this
me too.
Social media and I don't want it, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden you're all consumed in it, you know. And mobiles, Jesus, God, where's my mobile? Oh my God, my mobile. Early season, I have 3 or 4 friends. Richard Tong's a good friend, Jeff Johnson, who's a guide up in Cumbria now, and a few others, and we're constantly messaging each other through the day, like as the hatch started, blah blah, where are you, what's it, you know, this kind of thing. And it's that at the end of the day you reflect on that, and some of the comments, it's so goddamn funny, you know. You know, Richard, I'm sat here scratching my backside, nothing's happening, you know, or words to that effect.
It's amazing how deeply some people it can bite. I see fishing, sometimes there's people who go fishing to catch some fish for the freezer, and that's all fine, and they don't do it. Some of us are just so deeply entrenched in it that it, like you did that Freudian slip of saying fishing when it should have been whatever the word was, I can't remember now. And I'm the same with Emma, and I'll say fishing when I'm supposed to say shopping.
Yeah.
And it's just so deep within you. And one of the questions I was going to ask you a little bit latterly, but I'll ask you now, was that I remember when we fished, I think it was the Wiley, and you'd driven down, I think you were doing some stuff on one of the other chalk streams. We met up and you shook with excitement.
Yeah.
Does that still happen?
It does, Pete.
Good.
I'm not going to say ashamedly. Yeah. I still get... Yeah. If I'm doing especially with overseas trip, and that's not me putting an emphasis that overseas trips are better, but it happens here, and it'll happen today, and I'll tell you for why. I haven't fished the Tor before today. So new rivers or new experiences get me all excited, you know, and I'm all fingers and thumbs. And before I do trips now, I've got to tie leaders up at home, because if I leave it to the rip, when I get down there, it's half an hour and I'm still like a bimbling idiot, you know. And I look like a bloody amateur, I really do.
And if we ever lose that, though, you probably have to walk away, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. If you're not enthused by it, or if it's here we go again, another office day, because I strongly believe each time we go out fishing, I don't strongly believe, I know it, it's unique. The river level's never the same. Every single fish you catch is unique. Because it's individual in its habits, its nature, what it's feeding on, where it's lying, depth of water, speed of water, overhead light, blah, 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 so on and so on. You know, that will never repeat itself ever again.
No,
you know.
Amazing moment. You know, I openly admit, and I think Emma, for the first issue, wrote about salmon fishing. I remember her choosing her fly, making the cast. We took that fish. We've not taken a fish since. It was her first ever salmon.
I remember seeing that photograph, Pete.
And we both cried.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
We still shake, and Emma had, I think, just before we did a podcast with Damon, that she shakes, I shake, and it's just, it's so deep, isn't it, that it's really hard to explain and to people, isn't it?
A lot of people who are listening to this will connect with what we're speaking about. Those perhaps thinking of getting into the fishing for the first time or on the fringes will probably understand it, but it won't have deep meaning. It's funny you mentioned tears and things. I get big trout, and you know, I get tears in my eyes. I'm like, when I net them, I had one in Iceland recently, not short of £10. I thought it was going to be a trophy, you know. And Pete, honestly, I was just shaking, and I had tears and a lump in the throat. And I can remember I was lucky some years ago to fish with Stiani Ben in Iceland. Great guy. He doesn't fish a lot now. He's into CrossFit training. Stiani and I were still good friends, but Stiani took me to Thingvallavatn and the big lake, and I got into some monstrous fish.
It was a year or two ago, wasn't it? Yeah, I remember those. Yeah.
I mean, man, I after catching one, my biggest ever, which was just shy of £16, that night I never slept a freaking wink. And then, but when it happened, Stiani was with me. I was up the bank and I hooked this, and he could see I was wrestling this thing, so up he comes with his big guy net, and eventually we net it, and I'm physically just like, I'm a wreck. And he's got his hand on me, are you all right? You all right? And I'm just like, I can't even speak, Pete. I'm just mumbling.
Yeah.
And he's thinking I'm having some kind of freaking seizure. You know?
It is extraordinary, and I wanted to ask your advice on something, because as you know, I was very fortunate that I was fishing with Emma the other day, and she was salmon fishing. There wasn't much going on. We'd had not even a tiny lift, but it felt like it was right to have a go. And I said to her, I'm going to just pull a streamer and see what's happening. And I was very fortunate to catch, I'll never catch a fish like it again for Devon. You know, as you've seen, the standard size, 8, 10, 12 inches. That thing we weighed, thankfully she had the salmon net, and we weighed it was just under 4 1/4.
Yeah, that's a brute.
Now, I will never, and I'm sort of wrestling, I don't know where I am with that now. Do you know what I mean? That it's such, I exactly as you say, I was shaking, and part of me thinks I'm never going to catch a fish like that again down here. I don't think.
That's what I'd consider a UK trophy by no stretch of the imagination.
And I don't know how, you know, part of me says, I wish that was the last fish I caught. And I don't know how it will, it's kind of interesting. How do you sort of, you know, if you've caught and we're coming on to the fishing obviously clearly, but say you've caught a 5-pounder, is it about that getting a 6-pounder, or is it just that particular fish in a difficult to reach place, or a rising fish?
Okay.
So it's a really interesting, I'm sort of kind of, you know, in my head I'm thinking, this is just so amazing. And how do I cope?
But in some ways it's a rare occurrence for you.
Yes, it is. Yes.
A fish I mean, that'd be like in my neck of woods, catching something like a 15-pounder, I suppose, you know, that I'm regular getting. And again, I don't want to sound like in fact, I feel like whispering it to you. Turn the mic off. Steady away getting fish of 3, 4, 5 pound, you know. So, and they're all special to me, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But that in sort of putting that into context, that'd be like me nobbling a 12, 14-pounder. Which I would think, crap, you just can't better that.
Yes, and it was an amazing feeling, and I shook, and Emma was shaking, and I think, you know, then I had a 14-inch fish trouting with just standard stuff a little bit later, which was equally as beautiful. And the nice thing was that it wasn't, well, that's too small. You know, and that's what I would worry about, that you could go down a rabbit hole.
Again, my talking with. If you, I don't know what questions you've got there. I don't know if you want to discuss if it's the correct moment just now. How I got into the big fish thing.
Well, that would be really, really interesting, because I was going to mention to you, and I remember, to me, it felt about, you're obviously going to put me right on this, but it felt about 10 years ago, and it may be longer, it may be shorter, but I remember I'd fished a river, and it wasn't in Devon, and I'd done pretty well, and I'd had, for the riverside, I'd had a 16, 18, 20 and 20.5-inch fish.
Bloody good fish.
And I phoned you up, and I thought, and I said, Paul, I've had a 20.5. I don't know if you remember this.
I do remember
and then you'd been somewhere, and you said, well, I've just had a 5-pounder, and I was deflated in seconds.
Oh, was God, that, Pete, don't make me feel like that. I feel awful now.
But was that around the time you started to look at these
before
things?
Then. I mean, I was into big fish way before. Again, the internet and technology we have now, way before social media, you know, getting some I'd like to post some of them, but I like my posts these days to be sort of relative and in the moment rather than throwing a lot back from the, way back. Occasionally I do that, but again, an influencer there was Richard Tong. He's a very good friend of mine, lives in Yorkshire. And Richard and I met many years ago, and we shared. Then I was having a little bit of a grayling sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just pursuing grayling a lot, But wild trout, brown trout have always been my first love. And we started doing a few trips together, and then we found ourselves up in Aberdeen and on beats where there was some big trout, and we both got hold of one, and that stuff's contagious, Pete. That is the problem. You get hold of a lump and you want another and you want another, and God knows how it happens. Suddenly I'm down this road just pursuing big fish, and again, I don't want to make it sound it's for me, it's just for me. The main reason I post, if you want to discuss that, is I just like people to know I'm walking the walk, not just talking it. I want people to know I'm out there doing it, and it's important to me.
That's funnily enough, I think you're dead right. I'm the same. I fish. I post not all the time, but I'm fishing most days, and part of that is from the magazine point of view as well. To let them know. But I want them to know that the people involved with the magazine are hard. They feel the same way as you. They do, with exactly the same sort of thing. I'm out there in my life as we touched on revolves. And it's really cool to.
We've kept in touch since we've met, and I know your history and your development and everything. But here's something again. Half the big fish I catch, I don't even post. I just post because again, you can think, oh, here's Paul with another.
I know we've talked.
Showing off, blah blah blah. And I mix it up. I post things that I think people will find interesting. And I'm well into my insects, as you probably know, and bugs, and making that connection with trout fodder, that kind of thing. But the big fish thing, it just morphed into that, really. And it does excite me more than anything. And I still now, and you talk about shaking when, tackling up. I come across a big fish, drop in behind it, and honestly, Pete, you would think I was a beginner. There's a lot of nervous energy, and going through my brain is the 1,000 ways I'm going to bugger this up. What is going to go wrong here? Because it's never a given with big fish, and more so with big fish. And
that's wonderful for our listeners to hear somebody like yourself saying that in two ways. In one, the way that fishing affects you, and I always say to people, you're an amazing angler, and I've had the pleasure of fishing with you. But we're human, aren't we? And we all get caught in trees. All get, and it's not what people always think it is it?
Pete, I can remember doing a demonstration one time, and I'm not overly big on demonstrations. They make me nervous, and I know you need some nervous energy. First bloody cast, I pinged the fly in the tree, and there's a roar from the audience. So for one time, I was quick out of the blocks. I turned around. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you're fishing correctly and right on the edge, you're going to be catching trees. But it does happen. It happens to me all the time. Big trout getting right tight hidey holes and things like that. And some you win, some you lose.
I used to put myself in a really difficult position being a fishing guide, that when you fish with people, they expect you to catch all the fish. And if you don't, you're crap. And psychologically it was and I went through I wrestled with that. It was really hard to relax when I was on the river, because everyone expected amazing things, and
I can relate to that. We got an invite to a river that housed some big fish in Scotland, and the guy came along and he said, this I've seen big fish in this pool, and there was no question. I could tell straight away it was a place where you get big fish. It had all the ingredients, and he ambled down the bank, and within 5 minutes he was back. He said, "Have you caught one yet?" I was expecting a £5. I said, It doesn't work like that. I said it might take 2 days. I'm waiting for a period when there's enough food coming down that a big fish feels it'll come out and start feeding, you know. And yeah, it's the same thing. People think you can just go out and pull a bloody 3, 4, 5 pound fish out of the hat. What they don't see, they see the post, and you know, and I've spent days looking for big fish or staking out. I found a real big one not that many years ago, you know, somewhere between, I would say, 7 and 8 pound. And I thought, this is a big fish. I mean, my UK best wild fish is £8 3 ounce.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an absolute animal. I doubt I'll ever better it. I know there's bigger out there. I'm comfortable with that, and I'll try to better it, of course. But this particular fish, and I kept going back, and it was quite far away from home, so it involved I'd stake it out till last knockings. Too late to drive back, so I travel with a sleeping bag in the car and just kip in the car and things like that. Get up the next morning, check it out, see if it's about, if it's active or not, and then if not, bugger off, cut my losses and fish somewhere else on my way home. But that is what people don't see, you know.
Yeah.
And
it's proper dedication, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's absolutely phenomenal. So let's go to a fishing scenario. Let's say, I think you've answered most of these questions really in that sense, that you're coming up on a pool and you happen to see what you think is a big fish rising.
Yeah.
What do you, for our listeners, what do you look for? What tells you it's a big fish? How are you interpreting that? Are you thinking how you're playing it through in your mind? You know, how would you go about that? So we're going down to one of the pools today and you see a big fish rising.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I'm feeling pressured already.
No. I'll be happy just fishing the river and catching a few fish today on dry peat. I've got no illusions.
Nice.
You've got to take it as it is sometimes. I know my area in terms of big fish. I know where to go, when to go. I've got that luxury. I've built my life up to be able to. Yeah. So I expect that. But when I'm travelling, you take what you can. Yeah.
So how would you approach that then? So we come up on the pool. I'm picturing the pool I'm going to take you to where I think there might be something interesting for you.
Sure.
You see something moving. What is your thought
Right,
process?
first thought process is just sit back. Just don't rush in. It's so tempting. And you'll have seen it when you're guiding folks, see a rise they want to be in. So I want to make sure between me and that potential big fish is no other big fish or reasonable fish that might push up the pool when you advance and put the big fish down, you know. So there's a period, it could be 20 minutes, where I just sit back and watch. It could be less, equally it could be more. If there's a lot of fly coming down, it's probably more because that fish is really confident, you can take your time. And then I'll move up a bit closer and getting an idea what it's feeding on. You know, if it's spring in our neck of the woods, it's 1 or 2 flies. It's either a large dark or a March brown, and or both. And I think fish don't get locked onto one or the other really. They might get on a stage like the emerger as opposed to the dun. But I've been in hatches of hatches when March browns and LDOs have been coming off, and fish they're not singling out March browns. And equally, they're not singling out LDOs. It's like they're grateful for what they can get, you know. But I'll assess. I'll think, right. Let's assume it's spring. Well, he's eating large darks, and I see a dun come over it, and he eats 1 dun, but the next 5 duns he doesn't eat. But there's rise forms. To me, that suggests he's on the emerger because I can't see the dun. It's just subsurface. So I'm going to edge my bets and go with an emerger pattern just now. Then I'm thinking, where's it best for me to present for? I'm very much of a school of presentation over fly imitation is more important. So I think ideally, where am I best situated? And it might not always be the cast, it might be a compromise. Let's assume he's against a bank. I know the listeners can't see and we're gesticulating here. He's again a steep bank like this. There's the trout. He's using his glasses case for the benefit of the audience. And there's a deep undercut bank just by the side of the fish. Now, if I come in behind him, throw up and he eats, I haven't got the leverage. He can dive into that bank. So I want to be opposite him so I can lean on him to get him away from cover. So there's all these things going through my head, you know. And positioning that is one of the most important things for me. which allows both presentation and, in the case of success, sort of steering that fish away from snags instantly.
And you touched on rises there, which is really interesting, because I was going to ask you about, it's kind of important that people work out rise patterns as well. They're being emergers, duns, whatever it is, spinners, and that's really super important as well, isn't it?
It is. I mean, usually, again, just use your eyes. Observation's a big thing, and patience, and I think it's one of the questions, so we'll leave that for a wee while. But just use your eyes, get a feel for what... if his snout's coming right out of the water, the fish is clearly lifting and waiting for something to drift into its mouth. So it's on surface food. If there's just a slight push of water, he's eating emerges just stuck beneath the surface. And big trout... Oh, excuse me, Pete, just burping there. I could have let a ripper out. But what are we like? Bloody boys.
Kids.
Good job we're not having a beer.
Yeah.
Where would it go if we were having a beer?
Downhill fast.
These big fish they don't push a lot of water about when they rise, because if you think about it, as that fish grows, if it rises quickly, it displaces a lot of water. So it's rising to a food item, a small one. Displacement of water pushes that food item off the back of the fish. So they're pretty cute. They just rise with enough just to get what they need to do.
And are you thinking at that stage about timing of the rise? Because our fish, we don't get... There's very few times, there was a couple of years back where olive hatches here, for some reason the fish were on them, and I had 3 patterns for about a week that I was varying between, and we had consistent rises. Here, we get them, but very often they may be just a oncer and go away. Would it be that you're thinking about timing, or if it's the case that it is just come the once, you'll just leave it alone and wait for it to rise more regularly?
What I'm looking for, really what I'm doing, Pete, if you analyse it, is hunting or going out looking for hatches or falls of flies, be they black gnats, ants or beetles or whatever, that have enough substance to get big fish excited and out on the feed. Once, as if it's big, I'll wait on it. And there's days, Pete, I go fishing, I don't make a cast. I walk around and I do not make a cast. If I'm looking for a big boy, people might see that as, well, you've got your head up your backside, Paul. I've walked past pound fish. Don't get me wrong, afterwards I've chastised myself and said, you bloody numpty, why didn't you take that opportunity? But sometimes you really do get consumed. I'll never speak out. He's a weird one. I'll never speak out against people who take drugs within reason, because I get it. It's an addiction, man.
Yeah, no, I 100% get where you're coming from. I'm with you and with fishing as a whole. So your fish is there. Let's say you've covered it and it's not eaten.
Yeah.
Will you quickly change pattern as a result of that, or will you think about drag?
Okay, if it's rising regular, my mindset is I'll cast 3 times to it. If it doesn't eat in them 3 casts, I will rest it. If I know what it's feeding on, let's go back to the scenario we spoke about. There's LDOs coming down, it's spring. It's either on 1 or 2, it's either on the duns or stillborns or emergers. So let's assume I can see it physically eating duns, but there are some other rise forms where you think, what did it eat there? Maybe a midge or perhaps an emerger, but then next rise it eats another dun. So you think, well, I've got my flies on it, I've got a cul de canard F fly on or whatever. I'm not one for changing flies a lot. Again, back to presentation. I will shuffle, I'll move position. I'll think, right, my fly might just be, there might be a wee bit of micro drag on that. Yeah. I'm going to move position and I'll rest fish. I'll have 3, for me, my mantra, 3 casts. If it doesn't eat, I'll rest it, because fish are so quick, I think, and big fish, to get on to something's not right.
And leader length, what are you playing with leader length?
Leaders can vary massively, Pete. It's not a given. I can remember an authority at a talk I went to some years ago. Well, I fish an 18-foot leader and blah, blah, blah. You can't do that, because in the teeth
Still
of a
different,
gale,
isn't it?
18 foot a leader takes some turning over.
Yeah. On one of our little streams it would as
well.
Yeah.
And the other thing, under trees, long leaders are, you want a short leader that just quickly turns over. So I'm of the long leader camp, and where conditions allow, I'll use long leaders. And it's touchy-feely. I'll probably start round about 16 foot. But even yesterday, I ended up, I measured my leader at the end of the day, and it was just over 19 foot, actually. For the river I was on, it was low, and that just came about because conditions permitted that. So I'll vary. And here's another good one for you. Remember some years ago, I was on a black knapfall and the fish were just going mental. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to start stepping up in leader strength. I got up to, with a size 16 black imitation, tippet strength of 14 pounds.
Nice, yeah.
For Christ's sake.
I did that guiding somebody once, actually, and he said he'd read something somewhere, you've got to have this. I said, let's see. And let's see what we can. I think I got to 12 or something like that, and we were catching fish. And it's kind of interesting how those things enter your mindset, but equally, if you're fishing a 12-pound tippet, you don't fish as confident with a 4-pound tippet
absolutely.
or whatever it is.
And there is the other end of it. There are times when I go to Bosnia, you're on 0.1 or 0.09 millimetre, which is approximately just over a pound breaking strain. And it's not, let's not pretend or kid ourselves that fish can see tippet, because there's a bloody big hook bend hanging out of the backside of the fly.
They eat that still.
Yeah. It's about how the fly's presented, how it moves. So as a general rule, finer tippets for smaller flies so they conform with surface currents.
Yeah. And do you enjoy, one of my favourites is a masked hatch, and spotting a masked hatch. Is that something you enjoy?
I do. I've experienced that. It can take you unawares. Usually with two very different insects, typically something like black gnats. Often happens with small beetles in our neck of the wood, because when they drop to the water, they're a bugger to see. They sit so damn low in the water, but you give yourself a pat on the back when that happens. You've worked it out, and it's good to do that.
Yeah, I know. I was guiding somebody right out the back of where we're sitting, actually, a guy called Richard, and I remember it well, that the fish were rising. I thought we'd catch them, we didn't, and it suddenly twigged to me that they were rising when the wind blew, and beetle on, fish caught.
Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. And they're nice. Fascinating things when you spot those. It doesn't always work that way. It would be lovely if it did every time. I wanted to come on to patterns a little bit. I have to say thank you to you for the pearl butter merger.
Oh yeah, the pearl.
I have caught so many fish on that. Actually, Zoe, who writes for us, is in this issue that's just coming up. I took her fishing the other day, and we chatted about some other stuff, and we saw some rising fish, and it's always boom. She had a lovely one.
Fantastic.
It's a great fly, and has caught many fish.
Yeah,
it's easy to tie and so damn effective.
One of my better moments.
But it goes to show simple can often be best,
I've tied flies again straight away. I was into fly tying as soon as I got fly rod. Here's the thing: I'm a left-hander and I tie flies right-handed.
Oh, really?
And it was based on looking at illustrations in books.
Course,
Just pick that up. So tie right-handed.
That's really interesting. Is there another pattern that you would say, or is there a couple of patterns that I know you're not so big on patterns, but that one, is there because I was thinking about, actually, while we've just been talking about CDC, do you remember when it first came out? There was no way to treat it or anything, was there?
Yeah,
it was
when we first became aware of it, absolutely. Yeah, the apt, or all-purpose terrestrial, again, one of mine, and I'm not one of these precious guys. I've never named a fly after myself. I'm not like that, but like the pearly butt, and all the pearly butt is really is an embellishment on an existing fly, like a tie pearly butt blowers, water end blower with a wee pearly bit on, but it's damned effective. And then there's the apt, which all-purpose terrestrial, and that Pete, that fly's just, I'm so chuffed with that. it's caught me fish all over the world.
I have. Funnily enough, the first time I'd seen it, I had John Boone come down. I don't know if you know John, if you met John.
I know the name, yeah. I think we've met, actually.
He came down and guided with us for a year, and his first fish on the tour was on that fly.
Was it?
Yeah.
Great.
He said, I've tied some up, I've seen this thing, I've tied
Procter's
some.
article.
Yeah, which isn't that cool, though, that you're influencing people with what you're saying and the patterns that you're tying and people using them.
It's nice thought. I don't think of it like that, Pete. I mean, when I write, I do it. I'm not a natural writer. I wrestle with it. I'll be brutally honest. But I enjoy sharing what I'm learning because I am fortunate or made it my business to be out there a lot, seen a lot. You know that, Pete, from guiding and what you do. When you're spending a lot of time on the river, you're just so in touch with it.
You see and feel stuff there. Yeah, you're right.
Unreal.
You're dead right. Yeah. And it is, like you say, the hatch times, whatever it is,
you've got it pinned right down.
Yeah.
You know, I have diaries, not just a fishing diary. I have a journal for insects, what insects I see, when, timing, blah, blah, blah. And invariably, to the year often, you can pin it down to within a day or two when they're going to start appearing.
Yeah, it's the same with Granham. For us here, although we get large darks, we get March browns, the fish don't really get on them. It's Granham.
Our first big hatch is the Granham.
It's Granham, and that's when the fish start to rise. Not always. It takes warming up this river, and that's usually when I know fish, and that's usually about, my birthday's 10th of April, and it's around that so it really gets going.
Are you in Taurus then? Are you a Taurus?
No, I'm Aries.
Just outside, because my birthday's 26, so I'm...
Right, yeah.
I'm a stubborn bastard.
Yeah, no, I'm the other way. I don't believe in any of that stuff, but I'm a typical Aries. But that's when that hatch really gets going, and there's a guy used to come down for a couple of days around Easter or around that sort of time, and I knew when he booked, usually they're starting to get on the Granham and you're starting to catch fish on this. And it's just a magical moment when you're starting to see fish rise. You're thinking, sometimes here, March, are there any fish? Where are they?
Yeah.
You know, what's happened? And I remember a couple of years ago, and we have a big open day here, and it's a social. It's great. We all sit down and have breakfast, and people, and Toby Merrigan was down actually with a crowd, and I remember us catching fish on open day on dry flies.
Fantastic.
That were rising, which was also, it doesn't happen.
When is your open day?
15th of March.
Right, same as ours then.
Yeah. So, but it can often be, you know, there's very, very little going on. You're scratching your head. So, and I kind of know it's going to be like that.
Yeah.
But every year you hope. It's going to be, and you wonder where those fish have gone. But coming back to fishing again now, what advice would you give a river angler if there was one piece of advice?
One piece?
Yeah.
I would say observation. Just up,
Great.
you know, I'm like I was saying earlier with Howard always, and he always laughs and he has me giggling, you know, bloody hell, Bill, blah, blah. So, so many people, it's not a skill. We're all capable of it, but I am like Inspector Clouseau, you know. Really, I'm all the time scoping. A few friends I fish with, you say you're looking around all over the goddamn place. You like your heads, you know, and it's just the way I am. And I think that all those little things, you know, accumulate and to make a bigger picture. So observation, if I was to tag patience onto it, you know, that also would be, they're the two prime sort of attributes for me.
And as casting instructor sitting here, casting practice is so worthwhile as well, isn't it?
Obviously at back end of season, I've had a full season fishing, so I don't need to practice because I'm pretty much fishing every other day or every day. So you're on it. You know your game. You're polished. For me, you could say accuracy, and that doesn't mean landing it on a 2p piece. Far from it. What I like to do when I practice in winter or whatever is go out, just drop some. They don't have to be hoops. In fact, I cut out a load of fish shapes one time for a bit of fun out of cardboard. And imagine scenarios. The key thing for me is gauging distance. Is arriving at a fish, peeling off enough line, because you haven't had the luxury of working up a pool. You know, when you're in a pool, you're working with a fixed length of line. Let's say you're doing 30 feet cast, and you see a fish rise 10 feet out of the range of your last cast. So it's 2 paces up, it drops behind it. Another 2 paces or 3 paces. you know with that measured line, that fly's going to drop in front of the fish. You haven't got that luxury when you come on, in particular big fish, because you don't want to be making disturbance. You want to be making as least disturbance as possible. So it's gauging distance, and you know that first cast can be vital. You've seen it in New Zealand. I know you've been down there. I've spent a lot of time down there, Pete. And so many times, if that fly sort of lands level with the trout or just behind it, the fish will turn, come and look, and just as it's about to eat, it says, no, I'm travelling too far for this. I'm going back to my lie. And then it shuts down. So that for me, accuracy in terms of gauging distance, not so much about exactly placing the fly in front of the fish. I like to prefer to put the fly to the side, so the fish has to move off station to come and eat. So then when it turns back, I sometimes think you get a better hook hold, you know, and things like that. But gauging distance is a big thing. And I'll make one cast when I'm practicing, wind in. It takes some discipline to do this, believe it or not. You know yourself when you're teaching people, think your way through the cast, think it, and they do for the first couple of casts, and then for some reason they just start doing this, and they're not thinking about it. And you do that, you need to think, right, there's my target, cast, shit, I didn't hit the mark, wind in, do it all again, you know. But that sets, that makes you, or me, it improves my, you know, hook-up rate no end.
That's a really, really good tip. And moving away from trout just a little bit, I was going to talk about terrestrials as well, but we've sort of covered that. But the importance of terrestrials in fishing is really, do you think it's underutilised in this country?
I think certainly in our neck of woods. I mean, we're still quite lucky, though we're seeing it now. We know the drive from the River Fly Partnership, etc., was from the demise of upwing flies in the south. It's having effects in our neck of woods. But terrestrials have always been important to us, Pete. You know, the black gnat thing is our mayfly time. It's our duffers. You know, fever flies are black gnats. Beetles, this year I have had a sensational season. If you remember in April, we had a little bit of a mini heat wave, and there were just so many different beetles. I think they all just came out at once, you know, and man, some of the fishing I had was just, you know, absolute to die for.
I know my friend Perry was tied a load up and fished where we're going to fish, and he was doing rather well with them.
So, terrestrial's a big deal where I'm from. Pete.
And places like Dartmoor and stuff like that. You know, I remember I was fishing up there with, I can't remember who it was now, but we saw hoppers, we saw these.
Yeah.
You know, they're the fish will just hit, but it's kind of nice getting that pattern right.
It is,
of course. In your mind and stuff like that. Let's go into tackle, actually. Before I was going to head overseas, but while we're talking about fishing, tackle and stuff, you know, it's really, I think your work with Scott and Mackenzie rods must have been fantastic. Scott's really, I know him a little bit. I actually measured his record distance cast at the CLA.
Nice.
So I was in the boat sitting there, and this thing went flying over the top of the boat.
I bet you couldn't row quick enough.
It was unbelievable.
I bet you felt under pressure.
Yeah, that's my claim to fame, that one, I tell you. That I measured his record cast. Yeah. Super, super nice guy. And you're enjoying that experience in the rods and being involved with design?
Yeah, Scott, Scott, he's an absolute gentleman. He's a pleasure to be around. His enthusiasm and drive for getting the product, the Mackenzie brand, right, he's just absolutely second to none. He's great. You could argue he's a dour Scotsman, but we'll park that one just for now. It's been. I'm very proud of it because it's a UK-based company. It's a young company, and we're delivering. You know, Scott's message is designed through experience, and it's not about big flash rods or anything like that. Yeah, cosmetics are relatively important. We're bringing to the market good, honest, and very well constructed fishing rods. That's what we're about.
And you're obviously choosing, because I know you prefer those 10-foot, 3-4 weight rods. That's your standard rod still, is it?
10-foot rod's my go-to. For big fish hunting, I'm happy with the 10-foot 4-weight. That's principally based. It's a trade-off. You've still got a degree of delicacy with a 4-weight. Obviously not like a 10-foot 3-weight or a 2-weight. But there's enough there. But conversely, you've got the backbone for dealing with stubborn fish or bigger fish, you know. So that's quite That would be my benchmark, the 10-foot 4-weight.
And that process as well, that I assume, knowing yourself, knowing Scott a little bit, it's not a, right, here's some blanks, we'll make those work. I would suspect you're going backwards and forwards in the process. It's quite a long and drawn out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Scott is, he's very talented, and he's, as you know, he's a world leader in terms of double-handed or salmon rod. And obviously, I'd like to think we complement each other. I bring to the table the single-handed side of things, both with the trout rods and the saltwater rod. But the amount of backwards and forwards, it drove me crazy. We're tweaking them, and sometimes Scott, bless him, do we really? And I said, Scott, we want it right. I said, what are you like with your salmon rods? Aye, and he wants it blob on. And we do with our trout, with the trout side of things. We want to nail it. We really do.
Fantastic. And you're pleased with how they're performing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We beyond expectations. Very nerve-wracking, Pete. I mean, I've in the past been involved with Scott fly rods in the USA.
I remember those days.
Yeah. I mean, great brand as well. And some other stuff with Orvis along the line with the Western 2s. But when it's all on your shoulders all of a sudden, it's God almighty, it's down to my say at the end of the day kind of thing. Yeah, we've got a great bunch. There's input from Scott and the guy, a great caster in his own right, Andrew Toft. He was heavily involved.
I saw him at Sportfish.
Very intelligent guy in terms of rod understanding, design and fly lines and everything like that. So we get together, and there's a lot of kind of toing and froing, and my idea, we can all make casting rods that will ping fly lines to the horizon, but a fishing rod's a bit of a trade-off, isn't it? You need that performance in terms of delivery, and conversely, you need a rod that's going to yield and protect tippets.
Yeah. And so what do you do with that process? Are you stringing up a lot of different fly lines through the rods and trying them? Do you say this line works really well with this one?
I have lots of different fly lines. We went to the factory. Basically, you get some blanks to play around with. Then we were involved with the rolling process in the factory and the mandrills, and it bashed my brains in, Pete. It really did. It was 5 days worth when we were out there that I could quite easily forget. It was full on. And then you start doubting yourself. Let's have a look at this and this material or this resin or whatever, and try this and this rod. Well, this is nice. We'll put a 3-weight line through it, a 4-weight, and then a 5-weight, and then various head lengths, and just try to get a feel for, or a benchmark on what you would determine what a 5-weight is. Yeah. Because as you know more than anybody these days, and it is confusing for a lot of people, what is a 5-weight these days, for example?
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. You are. And I think, I've tried saying these previous ones, I just think of it purely as payload. Line weight, and my ability, if I'm fishing a duo, will a 3-weight chuck it better than a 2-weight, or would a 5-weight be better? And that's how I'll have light lines, so I'll have 1 and 2 weights, and then 3 and 4s
4 weights,
if I'm going to fish the duo, which is generally a lot of the time. Actually, this year I've been fishing a 10-foot 3-weight, and down there with just a dry fly, and it's been perfect for me. Deeper bending rod, as you say, better for playing. I'm discovering these bigger fish and how to play these bigger fish.
You can lean on them with a...
You can, without it popping, and which is really interesting.
The other thing with a softer rod as well, the loop, the turnover forms slower. So it allows you to gauge it. Sometimes with them really fast action rods, and you, for want of a better term, pinging it off the tip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Bouncing it.
Yeah.
Those loops form very, very quickly, and as you know more than anyone, once the fly line's fully extended, the cast is spent. There's only one place it's going, gravity. It's dropping to the water. They unfold so quickly. A deeper bending rod, that loop forms slower or extends slower, consequently buying you a little bit more time. You can be more relaxed about it, and for me, that helps with accuracy. Fast action rods, I always feel rushed, and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Having gone that way a little bit more so, actually, which is I'm sort of going around back again, and with my salmon, I'm fishing old patterns, and just to see if they're, I'm regressing rather than progressing at the moment. I was on to Jim Williams saying, "Oh, can I borrow they've got a fiberglass double hander."
Yeah. Wow.
And I wanted to try and catch. I didn't want to go green heart, but using a Lady Caroline or something.
Okay.
I'm fishing those sorts of patterns and see what it's like. And Jim and I are going steelheading in a month or so time, and we're both, I think. This will be brinkmanship, I'm sure, but I want to fish old style greenbacks skunks and green butts skunks, Lady Carolines, March Brown, those traditional beautiful patterns, and fish those and see. And I thought it would be kind of nice to throw a fiberglass rod just to see how it is. So I'm sort of going backwards and going, as you say, softer. And I think that's the thing of catching bigger fish where I'm fishing now, that I'm thinking more so about the ability to play fish and not pop them, basically, which is kind of interesting. But let's go abroad a little bit, because with your stalking of trout, bonefish and permit, and that must kind of fit your brief rather well.
Very much. I look at it, we were discussing it the other evening, just talking about overseas experiences and bonefish. I view it as subsurface dry fly fishing.
Reverse
stalking,
dry.
Stalking, and there's all them elements there, the visual aspect, and often if you're walking, it's ambush. Arguably, that's the difference. You're waiting for the fish to come to you rather than your fly going to the fish on a river. Yeah, but it's pretty much the same thing. Pretty much.
And do you get the same thrill out of that saltwater as you do with trout? It's always going to be trout.
It's always trout will be number one. If you would say if you've got one species to fish for, it's wild brown trout. There's no question about it. But it's a great sort of I wouldn't call it a sideline. Far from it. That's disrespectful. It fits hand in glove, because I tend to saltwater fish in the winter months, so I know I'm not missing the trout season here, but. Yeah, again, that environment, and the best thing is you can do it in shorts and flip-flops, Pete.
Which is nice.
Talk about liberation.
It's quite cool, isn't it? Yeah, I'm due. I've not been for a while now, and it's starting to bite a little bit. I think, for me, out of all of them, if I were to get a thing, would probably be tarpon, actually.
Yeah, okay, I get that. I thought it'd be permit for me. I never got the permit thing, because when I do salty trips, and to a degree, I'm still wide-eyed. Like if it moves,
right? Yeah.
I don't care if it's a barracuda, if it's a trigger fish, if it'll eat a fly, I want to catch it. But just these last few years, I've really got heavily into the permit thing.
And you've done pretty well.
I've been, again, fortunate. For some reason, I seem to be in the right place, right time, and freaking nail these permits.
Well, I remember, again, another phone call we had, and you were going down to Mexico for the first time. I was going the week after.
And
you
remember
gave me a report,
and
I said, "How'd it go, bud?" Yeah, I had a super slam. Yeah. He said, and I remember you saying you should have it off when we're down there. The river, sorry, see it is, it's in your head. The temperature dropped about 12 degrees, and everything changed from there. The sun shines on the ranches,
God bless, we had fantastic.
The sun shines
because you went down with Ictid and all them boys,
there was Ictid and a few of the other. Matt was there. Matt McHugh, and it was great fun, but the weather just...
Well, that was a weird week. I fished with Jonathan Tomlinson, who's a good friend.
Yep.
And Jonathan was further along on his saltwater career than I am, if you want to word it like that. So he was permit this, permit that.
He'd done a lot in Belize.
I was like... A bonefish. I just want to, barracuda, get me a rod, shark, all this kind of thing. Yeah. But you can't. If you're looking for permit, you've got to commit.
Yeah.
So all week we worked it out. In the end, we went out with the guide. The guide had dropped me on a beach. I'd go and mess about, get bonefish out of my system. They'd go looking for permit. Jonathan had hooked a couple that week, good size fish. They never stuck. And then it's the last morning, and we're out. And it's the last day. What do you want to do? Bonefish. Guide says, well, it's good conditions for permit. Let's go and look for permit. And I'm having a bit of a hissy fit in the boat, permit. And anyway, we sort of rock up onto this flat, nice permit flat. At the time, I didn't know that, but consequently I've fished there several times. And guide says, we just started poling. Jonathan says, I need to sort some tackle out, blah, blah, blah. Guide shouts, permit. And all week we'd had a bit of a thing going with the guide. There's a bit of camaraderie and jokes. So we thought it was taking the mick, you know. And, no, permit. And Jonathan said, P, you get up with the permit rod. Jumped out of the boat, we walked to them, intercept the shoal. I get a permit, don't I? Yeah. And I felt so sorry for him, you know. I thought, God, it's my first chuck at permit, and, you know, bloody golden balls.
It's not luck. Is it that I worked for a couple I guided. There was a couple, and they went down to Belize, and they wanted me to come along and help in the boat. So I poled the boat a little bit, and I stood up front and helped spot and stuff like that. They'd never saltwater fished in their lives. In 2 hours, both of them had permit.
Yeah.
And it was just, there's myself and the guy going, leaping up and down. We could, and I'd sit them down when we got back and say, you have done some serious stuff here, you know.
What's happened? Yeah. I kind of feel sorry for people like that. You hear stories about people salmon fishing for the first time and they hang a big one. And I just don't think they understand the concept of what's just happened.
They're amazing fish, aren't they? And all of those. So why is it salmon?
Yeah, well, I've spent a lot of time in Iceland and Scandinavia where they pronounce salmon salmon.
Right.
So it's just one of my little mischievous sort of sides, Pete. I like to do it here in the UK, and it's stuck now. I say salmon.
Yeah.
And that people like to correct me. No, it's salmon.
Yes. So that's not ever going to be on your radar, salmon fishing, is it?
I've done a bit.
Yeah.
I've did it with Matt. We spoke about Matt McHugh from Fly Odyssey. Up in Iceland. We had a day to kill between trout trips.
Yep.
So we fished on the Vatsna Delta.
Yep.
And a riffle hitch. Now, man,
that's awesome.
That is.
Yeah,
it's just watching big trout come up to eat the fly.
Yeah.
It's you can see these things, so you're stalking them, putting the fly over, tiny riffle hitch, and you've just seen this thing lift through the water and just porpoise. It is sensational. Yeah. I did enjoy that. If that's what salmon fishing was about,
if it were that
the
all the
bulk
time,
of the time, I could get into it.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping the steelhead as well, that we may swing some dry flies and spay casting with the double-handed rod is great.
Yeah, it's sort of fun. Poetry, isn't it?
It is stunning. Nice. Yeah, it's really. And Emma always says when she just likes to get a row of decent casts out and then that line goes. Just for that moment, that's why I do it. Everything else, boom, and it comes to life. And it's really, really bitten deeply for me, I have to say.
That's good. That's good.
So we're both in our 50s now. What advice would you give a 18-year-old Paul Procter now? Would you do anything different?
I'd probably do a few things different in myself, in some of my personal life, but we won't dwell on that. But I'll probably say to him, work hard at school, get some qualifications, go to the city, earn a stack of money and retire at 30 and go and fish your nads off around the world or something like that. That's what I'd probably do, Pete.
Yeah. But would you change it?
Does that remind you of anyone?
Yeah. Would you change anything?
Overall, no. I have no complaints.
Yeah.
I've been, I say lucky, but you forge your own sort of destiny and things like that. It's come at a cost, a hanker still, there's always that, it's hand to mouth sort of living for me. You're scratching about. I'm not after sympathy, because the turn of the coin is a sense of freedom, and I can just wake up and the conditions are right. I'm away, and that's important. I've been around some people in my life and certain things I've done, and they say, we can't harness you. You're just a free spirit, and you go and do whatever, you know.
So is my question, I'm looking at it here, does the fire still burn as brightly? We don't need to
absolutely,
go there.
Yeah,
we don't need to go there. So is there something you want to do next? What is it that you would like to do next? Is there somewhere you want to go? Is there something you want to do? Right.
Certainly for wild brown trout and big wild brown trout, which is kind of my bag. I like that. I'm not ashamed to say that. I've identified, I believe, the places. There could be one or two missing, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on it. But Iceland is a regular for me, Russia. New Zealand I've done several times, and recently Chile, and they were always the big four for me in terms of sort of searching out big wild brown trout. However, I'm drawn to this Mongolian thing, this Terman thing,
it
because
sounds amazing, doesn't it?
just for the adventure. I like adventure and hardship and things to go with my fishing. I'm big on camping and things like that, you know.
It does look amazing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And the golden dorado in the Amazon basin.
Yeah, Jim Curry's got that now.
Yeah, I need to speak with Jim, big time.
Yeah.
Big
And
time.
funnily enough, we've got a lady who's written a piece in the upcoming one, Getting Ready. She's called it Enjoying Sue Bramall, the Anticipatories. And she's leading us, I think, into a trip for Taman in Mongolia.
Right, okay.
And there's some beautiful images of the guys there in, you know, I don't know the equivalent of gauchos or whatever they're called there in Mongolia, I don't know. But in there, it just looks amazing.
It does. See, I could get into, they do a lot of the hunting with the golden eagles.
Yes,
there.
they do, yeah.
I reckon, Pete, if I wasn't into fishing, I could quite easily get into falconry. That I find that fascinating.
It is. I had a day for my birthday, and I know Emma was watching, thinking, "Oh God, he's going to want to get into this." I could see you got to. And it
What have I done?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
I can fully get that.
Yeah.
They're absolutely phenomenal. So destinations. Oh, you're going to write a book.
Oh God, where's that one come from?
I don't know.
Jesus,
I was thinking about it. I put some extra fastballs in for you,
Right,
and
yeah.
you know, so many people. Just talking to you today, there is so much information, knowledge, and skill that people.
Everybody's at me for that, and it is extremely flattering. But where do you start with that? I mean, What on what subject? A how to? I can't see myself doing a how to. It's a I need somebody out there help. Give me a theme for it. It's in there. I know it is.
Yeah.
The information's there, Pete.
Yeah.
The knowledge. It's just and again, it's back to me. I want to be down that bloody river. If you'll ghostwrite it, Pete, we'll do it.
I can't promise that. I've quite a lot on my plate.
While I'm fishing, I'll just blurt it out. Travelling, and then you can put it down on paper.
I'd be honoured to, obviously. Photography, one of the things that I touched on in the last podcast with Damon, I think, photography to us, what we're trying to do, we have no grip and grins in fly culture. And instead of preaching about that sort of stuff, we thought, wouldn't it be cool for people to see fish photographed beautifully in their natural environment?
Yeah.
Now, for you, catching those great big fish, how you take those photographs is phenomenal. Is there any advice you can give us about photographing fish?
Oh God! Well, I like photography, but
Yes.
I'm again self-taught. It just kind of happens. And I think a lot of photography for me is time and place. It's sometimes you can photograph fish in a particular way or whatever, and you think, God, to your eye it looks good, but through the lens it just doesn't interpret in the way you see it. And when you get back and you think, God, that didn't come out how I wanted. And my advice would be just take a lot of shots, obviously bearing in mind the welfare of your fish. But for me, it's time and place, a lot of it. And sometimes you'll photograph a fish and it might just be a wee one. I photographed one yesterday, but the light on its back was just fantastic, and you think, I nailed that one. So for me, it's just lots of shots.
And do you find getting them to sit still, because you sort of leave them
Everybody
semi-submerged?
says this. They reckon I'm
don't you?
some kind of fish whisperer.
Well, you are.
I play fish hard, right? I'm a big believer in the less time it's in that water, less likelihood you've got of losing it. Consequently, it's coming fresh and it's away sharpish, So often, and you'll know this, I can see you shaking your head knowingly, you'll scoop it and it just throws a mental in the net. It just throws a wobbler.
And you know they're in good shape.
Yeah. So sometimes with some fish, I just think it's just way too lively. You've just got to gauge the fish. As a tip, sometimes if you because I used to do this with a budgie I had when I was a kid, you put your hands over its eyes and it thinks it's night and literally just goes to sleep. And if you've got a fish that's deeply hooked, often I'll just mask the eyes, very much like putting a hood on a bird of prey, and it'll lie still. And then you just Photoshop your hand out of the way.
Yeah. So that's the secret. Now I've got to learn how to use Photoshop. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure. We could sit and talk.
Yeah,
I can see it's
easily.
getting a little bit warmer.
Yeah.
I think the river's taking a little bit of warming up this time of year. But things are a little bit warmer. I hope this hasn't been too difficult to sit down and talk about stuff.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
It really has, and I think people will get a lot from this. And you've done a lot for fishing, either directly or indirectly. And it's been great to be able to talk to you and ask you those sorts of questions.
Thank you.
So thank you. It's been great to get you down into Devon. I'm so excited to get you on the tour.
Yeah,
and let's see if we can get lucky. So Paul, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Pete.
It's been absolutely
great.
brilliant.
Like you say, we could just
we could go on for, and there's so much I wanted to talk about and haven't. But I wanted.
Well, let's do it again.
Absolutely.
Maybe in Mongolia or something like that.
Well, now you're talking. Now you're talking. So thank you so much. It's been great talking to Paul Procter and getting some tips, hints that I know I've learnt from as well, and I hope our listeners do too. Fly Culture magazine, if you haven't seen it, is a quarterly publication. You can see more about it. We're actually currently getting the website rebuilt, which we're going to make a little bit more interesting with more content for people to read, videos and bits and pieces, reviews, bits and pieces like that too. That will be coming soon, but you can buy the magazine at flyculturemag.com. We're on the usual social channels on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We post pretty regularly on those. We're really excited. We've got a new issue coming out. It'll be towards the end of the month. It's 7th of September while we're recording this, but it will be towards the end of the month. That will be our 5th issue. So I'm really, really excited. You'll be able to see a little bit more about that nearer the time. But this is Pete Tiger signing off from the Fly Culture podcast. I really hope you've enjoyed this. All that's left for me to do is go fishing and wish you good fishing. So thanks for listening, and I hope you'll listen to the next one that we do. Thanks very much indeed.